Is the United States producing enough electricity, or are rolling blackouts just around the corner? Yeah, let's talk about that.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show.
Well, hey there, folks. Welcome to another fun-filled episode of the Brian Nichols Show. I am, as always, yes, your humble host, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios here in sunny Eastern Indiana. The Brian Nichols Show is powered by the best heart health supplement in the world. So if you're looking to lower your resting heart rate, lower your blood pressure while improving your pump at the gym, stick around. We'll talk about that later in today's episode, or just go ahead, scan that little QR code over my shoulder, or head to cardiomiracle.com/TBNS. But first, let's go ahead and jump into today's topic of conversation. Electricity. Yes. Though it's everywhere and it's something we use every single day to make a normal life function. America, we've kind of been hitting the proverbial cruise control, and at least that's what it feels. And as we're seeing more and more technology that is way more focused on energy consumption in its applications, think of like your Tesla cars, the electric vehicles, AI, and a bunch of other areas. Is America keeping up? Are we producing enough electricity to actually make things happen while not sacrificing other areas? We also need electricity. So let's dig into that. Joining me here on the show today is Sarah Montalbano. Sarah, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on the show. I'm looking forward to digging into all things energy consumption, electricity. But first, Sarah, do us a favor. Introduce yourself here to the Brian Nichols Show audience and why you're focused so much on our energy consumption and production.
Yeah, thank you. So I am an energy policy fellow with the Minnesota-based think tank Center of the American Experiment. I'm also a senior fellow at the Independent Women's Forum Center for Energy and Conservation. So in the rest of my copious free time, of course, I'm also a contributor for Young Voices, which is a PR firm for free thinkers. So I'm very excited to work on this. I got into energy because I was born and raised in Alaska. And Alaska is obviously a huge oil, gas, minerals, timber, a natural resources state, right? And what I came to realize is that the federal government has not had a huge interest in these affordable and reliable sources of electricity until recently.
Very interesting. And I wonder why that would be. Why is the government not really focused on that? And you know, we've been a libertarian leaning-ish show here for, oh my goodness, like 7 years or so. 2018, yeah, 7 years. Holy cow, time flies. But when we go back, we've dug into the buddy, the corporatism, the cronyism that happens behind the scenes. But then we look at a true free market. What does the market demand, and what different solutions are being presented? And where we are today in 2025, right now, the market is presenting a demand for a higher consumption of energy because the different technologies we're leveraging, as I teased in the intro, AI, which everybody knows and loves or hates. And then on the other side of the aisle, I mean, electric cars. I know the Tesla dealerships and stuff and their little charging stations, those require copious amounts of energy. Thomas Massey, he was over on the House giving a nice little speech about that a few years ago. I think it was talking about how your average car for like a electric car, when you're charging it, requires enough electricity that it was like a couple of refrigerators being charged or being powered for like a week straight. So like you hear this kind of stuff, and yeah, I guess I hear it, right? There's a red flag, there's issues happening, but how real is the problem? Especially compared to the other larger countries that are out there. Help us kind of set the stage here, Sarah. Where does America currently sit in terms of our energy production relative to our energy consumption?
This is a huge issue currently, thanks in part to what you described with AI. So we are actually in 2025 seeing the first growth in electricity demand since about 2005. It's been 2 decades since we've had any appreciable increase in our electricity demand, because up until very recently, we're seeing the gains from energy efficiency, right? We were increasing our productivity with electricity, but we were actually using less of it. So we're stable for about 2 decades now. But what we're seeing is the Energy Information Administration, the EIA, U.S. commercial electricity consumption is up already 3% in 2025 and 5% expected in 2026. And these are both record highs. The Department of Energy has its own forecast for data center demand. They're supposed to double or triple their demand by 2028. So we could reach up to 12% of U.S. power being exclusively funneled towards data centers and AI. So there's a lot of estimates out there. I think the big question on everyone's mind now is, well, how much is it going to be? And there's a lot of credible estimates, and no one is for sure going to be on the money here. But, survey says a lot. There's a lot of estimates, and none of them are expecting, growth will be flat over the next couple of years. Like, that's just a crazy thing to say. Obviously, we have a huge problem here.
Yeah, well, it's a huge problem. And I guess, we like to outline solutions here on the show to said problems. So, I mean, Sarah, I know we might be jumping ahead here pretty quick, but like, what do you see right now as, I guess, a tangible first step? Because I've seen the charts. I'm going to have to look for one. Hopefully here I can pull up on the screen. But like, I've seen the charts of American energy production relative to China, for example. And I mean, America's energy production, for the folks playing along in the home game, my hand is going up at a slight, increase here. And China's is just like a straight line going up. And it seems like they're meeting the demand. Why is it that we're not meeting the demand? And I guess what would we need to do to start being able to actually come in the same stratosphere of meeting said demand?
Mm-hmm. A huge portion of this problem is what we've so far been building out to meet this demand. And a lot of it has been really wind and solar power. And those are great for certain applications, frankly, but they are intermittent, right? They will only be generating power when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, right? So we've had an overbuilding of those sources, of 400 gigawatts of new capacity that's being planned across the U.S. Over a time period. I didn't take down in my notes what it was, but only 60% or 60 gigawatts of that, 60 out of 400, is going to be the kind of dispatchable natural gas, coal, even nuclear to an extent. Those things we can ramp up quickly, and they're reliable baseload power. And that's what data centers need, right? That's what AI needs. And you can really see this because big tech needs to put their money where their mouth is here, right? And they're not running around procuring wind turbines and solar panels for their data centers. They're restarting, the 3 Mile Island Unit 1 reactor. Microsoft's doing that by 2027. They are finding nuclear sources that can still be zero carbon, but meet their reliability demands. So I think nuclear is a huge part of the solution.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds like a good step in the right direction, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's a good
I've been teasing here for a while on the show, and we've had a few experts here who've dug into this in detail. But like, if you don't have nuclear power as a like viable option for your energy needs, you're not really serious about trying to produce more energy, nor are you serious about, to your point, we talk about the Green New Deal and climate change. You're not really serious in addressing your so-called concerns when you're not looking at literally the best means of producing vast amounts of energy while at the same point in time having a incredibly significant less impact on the environment. So the fact that we're seeing these organizations, and you mentioned Microsoft, right? Going out, and Microsoft, I think Facebook, I heard, was also considering doing something like this with their Meta AI. So we're seeing that there's a push towards using nuclear, which I think is a great step in the right direction. But Sarah, you're going to get hit with objections, right? Are there not concerns? Are we not going to worry about a Chernobyl 2.0 or whatever was it, Fukushima over there in Japan back in like 2011? So what's being put in place to help mitigate any potential disasters or any unintended consequences of going this nuclear route?
That's a great question. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission has taken so seriously its commitment to safety. And frankly, that has led to almost an overcorrection in that direction, where we have seen only 1 or 2 reactors actually permitted under the NRC. The NRC hasn't been around forever, but over the last 30, 40 years, they've permitted one or two. Most of our nuclear plants are from before this time. So I am frankly pretty confident that we're going to have a very safe build out of these things. The other thing I would point out is that we are starting to see the rise of exciting technologies like small modular reactors and micro reactors. In my home state of Alaska, they're going to be doing a pilot project, and they actually just awarded the contract or are about to award the contract to Oklo, which has a small modular reactor design, and they're going to be building a SMR on the Eielson Air Force Base in Fairbanks. And it's going to be a really interesting pilot project, and I think it's going to be built by 2028, 2029, maybe.
All right, folks, elephant in the room. The world's a mess. Inflation is crushing savings. Politicians keep spending. So what's your backup plan? Oh, you don't have one. Well, if you don't worry. That's why the Expat Money Online Summit exists. From October 10th through the 12th, my good buddy Mikkel Thorup's bringing in global experts to show you how to protect your wealth, secure a second residency, lower your taxes, and even own property abroad. And by the way, it's totally free. So no flights, no hotels, just grab your ticket and tune in. And this year, the focus is on Latin America, with booming opportunities in countries like Argentina, El Salvador, Panama, and Paraguay. These doors are open right now, but only if you take action. And how do you do that? Well, head to expatmoneysummit.com and reserve your free, yes, I said free ticket. And by the way, if you want a full VIP package, you can use promo code TBNS for 20% off. That's expatmoneysummit.com, promo code TBNS. And now, let's get back to the show.
So they're going to be coming onto the scene very soon, and those have a lot of unique reliability and safety attributes as well. That just means that the kind of things we think of when we're thinking of, Chernobyl and things like that, that's just not going to be possible with these new technologies.
Well, and just for the audience's benefit, help us better understand some of these newer technologies, because we hear the name, right? And anytime you have the word nuclear, it puts up a red flag in some folks' brain. So just help us, Sarah, better understand, what do these newer technologies look like? I think you mentioned modular nuclear solutions. I know I've heard of like the little suitcase nuclear solutions that are out there nowadays. There's some guy over on Joe Rogan who's like, your cell phone could be a nuclear reactor, right? So just help us better understand what this actually is, and maybe dispel some fact from fiction of what we could see tangibly here in the next few years.
Sure. Yeah. I don't think they're supposed to get quite that small, but they are going to be able, the small modular reactors are going to be able to actually fit on the back of semi-trucks, right? So they're supposed to be able to be, assembled kind of factory wise, fit in a very small space, get pulled along to whatever an installation site that they're going to need to be at. And frankly, a lot of them are being designed so that they don't actually need to be refueled at any point within, a decade. And at that point, they can get pulled out entirely, and you don't have to deal with spent fuel at any part of the process. So small modular reactors, I think, are very exciting. There's, I believe, only one only one plan has been approved by the NRC. I believe it is from Oklo, the company. And I think it would be really exciting to see more innovation in this space. There's other companies that are working on their own, but just haven't gotten approval yet. So it's an exciting time. And I think we're going to see, they're really only between 1 and 50 megawatts of power. They can supply rural areas and off-grid applications, things like, a military base, a college campus. Those are the kind of applications I think we'll see first off modular reactors.
How much does it cost? Because this is just such a new world, right? I don't even have something to ground myself on for what this might look like. So give us a ballpark understanding of what goes into the cost of these. And then you mentioned a 10-year window where they won't really have to fiddle with it, right? So what does the cost then look like when the time does come to rip and replace or what have you?
Yeah, I don't know what the cost estimate's going to be on Eielson Air Force Base project. I know these are supposed to be a lot less expensive than major nuclear projects, right? Because, major nuclear projects are often criticized for running over budget, costing billions and billions of dollars, and those are things I think are legitimate critiques just so far as it's about the regulation. The NRC is often the one holding this up and leading to the cost overruns and delays, but a valid critique as far as it goes. Small modular reactors, I think, are going to cost a lot less, partly because they're going to be so kind of factory assembled, and their transportation costs, their construction costs, if you're just plugging it in, putting it into a site. I think the idea, I think I saw this in a DOE fact sheet at some point, but the idea is that you can plug these in and install within 2 or 3 weeks. Like, this is supposed to be a potential for kind of a rapid response, as well. If there's a disaster and you need to get energy to people, great, we'll plug one of these in. So I don't know the cost, but I think it's going to be a lot less costly in the long run.
Interesting. So, I mean, I can almost see situations where, a hurricane comes through and hits Florida and it's wrecked, and like FEMA, right, coming out with these these big tractor trailers, right, with these modular nuclear reactors, and you can basically set up shop and power like these small communities or these rural areas, or to your point, like, a college campus, have it kind of become like ground zero for enabling services and reaction and such to the disaster. So interesting. Okay. Well, how about this? Let's go towards everybody's favorite billionaire, Elon Musk. I mentioned him earlier. I saw another tweet of his. What does he call it? A post now on X? I don't know. Something. I don't keep up with it. Yeah. Does anybody? But anyways, he's really, at this point, he's promoting solar energy. And I've been seeing like he is really advocating solar energy. He's talking about how China has been going out of their way. They're building these ginormous solar fields, and their usage of solar energy and their production of solar energy, again, going back to the graph comparisons, America is like a straight line going horizontally, whereas China is a straight line going vertically. So help us understand a little bit more of the value or the roadblocks with solar energy. Is that a viable path forward?
I'm not bullish on solar, and here's why. First of all, I would note that Tesla, being a electric car company, that's really kind of a small part of their portfolio. They're also going into the batteries stage of things, the battery storage systems. And that is what you need, because solar is intermittent, like I said. So you need to be able to store the batteries. So I see this as those comments are somewhat, I think, in a business sense, good for Mr. Musk. But I digress. Solar energy, I think, the battery storage problem is going to be very, very expensive. And not only that, it's very material and mineral intensive, right? And so if we want to build the battery storage that we need in order to back up our grid fully and fully get off of, natural gas and coal backup power, that's going to be extremely expensive. And the other part of that is that these minerals and materials are mostly coming from foreign countries right now. They're coming from China. They're coming from Chinese-owned mines in Indonesia and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And that was a subject of a recent paper I wrote for Center of the American Experiment called Shattered Green Dreams, The Environmental Costs of Wind and Solar. It's an inflammatory title. I didn't pick it, but it's what it is, and I love it. And we talk about the material costs here, and we talk about the environmental costs, because this mining is being done in foreign countries under very lax standards a lot of the time, and often infringing on human rights and labor standards too. So I think those are all costs we need to think about with solar. I don't think it's going to solve the problem. I don't think it really can solve the problem. And even if it could, we need to think about the trade-offs of a decision like that.
Interesting. So we talk about trade-offs, and I guess the challenge with all trade-offs is timing, right? I would love to have a 0-point energy solution, because it would be phenomenal, right? It would eliminate all the issues, but that's just not feasible today, right? It's not something I can go to ABC manufacturing company and say, hey, let's mass produce this. So I guess then the question comes, what is, from a trade-offs perspective, the best options today, the best options tomorrow, and then the best options 5 years from now, right? Do you see a graduated approach to presenting some of these energy solutions? And if so, what would that look like?
Yeah, excellent question. Because I think in the short term, what we're already seeing is that we're seeing a natural gas ramp up. Natural gas has about half the emissions as coal. We're already, I think, in the United States, seeing a lot of coal-fired plants wanting to shut down in general. So that's opened up the possibility for cheap and abundant natural gas that also has lower emissions. It's not, without emissions, but it is lower than coal. And that is what we're seeing. And I think
You work out, you lift heavy, you're eating clean, but if you're not seeing better pumps, better endurance, or faster recovery, it's probably because you're missing a critical piece. So your body depends on nitric oxide to help push blood, oxygen, and nutrients into your muscles. And when your NO levels drop off, or if you're not maximizing them, it's like training with the brakes on. Less oxygen, weaker pumps, longer recovery. You're doing the work, but your body simply isn't keeping up. And that's where Cardio Miracle comes in. It's an advanced nitric oxide supplement loaded with L-citrulline, L-arginine, organic beetroot, CoQ10, and no junk. Just pure ingredients that synergistically work to increase blood flow, power your workouts, and accelerate your recovery without stimulants or synthetic BS. So if you want to make sure every set counts, just click the link in the show notes, scan that little QR code over my shoulder, or visit cardiomiracle.com/TBNS to feel the difference. And by the way, when you click that link, your discount will automatically be applied. Just look for Shopping with Brian Nichols at the top of your homepage. One more time, that's cardiomiracle.com/TBNS. And now, let's get back to the show.
I want to say it's about 40% of the data center energy demand that we're expecting is going to be met by natural gas, right? Because that's what's available right now while they need to be building the data centers to stay competitive. In the long run, I think nuclear is going to be the obvious solution for a lot of these major industrial applications and for a large part of the residential and consumer grid as well. There are many states with kind of backwards policies on this. Minnesota is one of them because we have a very strict moratorium on any certificate of need for new nuclear plants. So the Public Utilities Commission is not allowed to even consider new nuclear. And we have a mandate for 100% clean electricity by 2040. So that means more wind and solar. And that means we can't consider new nuclear, which is just backwards to me. And we're seeing the consequences of that with data centers. Amazon was considering siting a plant near Becker, Minnesota, and they pulled out after a really unfavorable law passed in the legislature in this session. So Minnesota's less competitive. That doesn't mean other states won't be. Other states, I think, are doing a great job of welcoming these kind of things. So natural gas in the short term, move towards nuclear in the long term.
Now, I want to point out the only time you brought up wind and solar was in the, that's what we're being forced that route, right? Which then goes to the, goodness gracious, Sarah, we've had like 20, 30 years of government policy trying to play buddy back, what we talked about when we started off our conversation today, cronyism, right? Like, hey, we're going to pick the technology that we want to leverage and we're going to subsidize this through government policy. And I mean, where we are today, I know I drive up I-70, I-65 north, whatever, up towards the Gary, Indiana area, and I'll be driving through a ginormous wind field, a wind turbine. I don't know what you want to call it.
Farm, I guess.
A farm. There we go. A wind farm. That's right.
Displaces a real farm, but
for real. And I guess like that's the question. Like you have a lot of farmers out there. That like landowners who they've gone out of their way to sell off their land or to lease their land towards these respective wind farms. And I guess, then the question comes, and I mean, this is exactly the same conversation for solar, but like, what happens to these technologies if they are to the point, as we've been talking about today, and we've had other guests in the show before, like wind and solar are not only inefficient, but there's a lot of cost that goes into developing the technology, not the technology from a technology standpoint, but the physical materials. To your point with batteries, the same thing with the wind turbines, the solar farms as well. And a lot of that stuff ain't so great for the environment, right? So we already have a lot of these different technologies out there. Do you see them fizzling away? Do you see them being repurposed, or is it something else?
I think the wind and solar make sense in certain situations for certain people. I think the problem with energy policy has so far been that it's mandated that this is good for all people at all times, for all of these utility scale applications. And so what we're going to see, and the federal government has actually rolled back for the first time in 30 years the production tax credits and the investment tax credits that were basically giving wind and solar developers a 30% or more tax credit on building this stuff. And you've probably been reading the news and you've seen all sorts of headlines. Oh, such and such project no longer economical after these tax credits go away. And that is because we've been building more than the market actually wants. The right amount of wind and solar is however much the market can absorb without any subsidies. And I think we're soon going to be in a situation in the next, year or two where those subsidies are coming away. And we'll be able to see how much actually the market wants. And I think the market really doesn't want all that much, but it may make sense in certain situations for certain people.
Do you fear, and maybe I'm using the word fear a little too cavalierly here, but like, do you fear any reversion towards technologies of yesteryear, namely going back to, just strictly like oil, right? Like just drilling for oil. Like, is that something that is a legitimate concern? And if so, how does the market help address this from a cost perspective and a demand perspective?
I'm not particularly sure I would agree with the premise there, because I see, oil, gas, even coal as often the energies of the future here. I think that's not only because, we have technologies coming up to the forefront being developed for carbon capture and, things that we can use to reduce their emissions, but also because they're fueling human flourishing, right? And there are countries all across the world that would kill for the chance to be able to, develop their own, coal seams, or
and they do kill for it, yeah.
And they do, and I think we take for granted a lot here in the United States the prosperity we have around us, and it's incredible to see, because we've been managing to make our environment better over the past 30, 40, 50 years without a ton of heavy-handed environmental stuff that has been all driven by innovation. To the natural gas point, natural gas has lowered U.S. emissions over time since the fracking boom. We have hydraulic fracturing now, and it made it cheaper, and it was able to displace more coal. So I think we will see more of these technologies, and we'll see them doing it better and more cost effectively. And the third and final point I would say is that we have an administration right now that is very friendly towards fossil fuels. I think that's a good thing, but I think we will also see a lot of caution from the business community, because they know things will change. We've seen lots of whiplash between administrations on, major natural resource projects like the Ambler Road in Alaska, to get access to critical minerals in that state. The logging in the Tongass National Forest, the Pebble Mine copper project, all of those are just
pipeline that got shut down before with Biden. Yep.
Exactly. So I think businesses are still going to be moving with caution and understanding that, they need to make plans a decade, 2 decades in advance, and they can't just think about what's happening on the ground.
I'm so glad you called out the framing of the question, because you're right. I guess I unintentionally led with a bias that I didn't even realize I had, because when you grow up in this environment of just being peppered with oil bad, gas bad, right? And this narrative is just it. I mean, from the moment you're a young kid, I mean, I don't know if you grew up in the era, right? Do you remember Captain Planet, Sarah?
I don't think
The
so.
show Captain Planet. No, so Captain Planet, back when I was a kid in the 90s, it was this show where you had this guy who, like, he was this superhero that was going to save all the world from environmental issues, and all the kids would come together with a special ring and it would give them powers, whatever. But like when you would watch that show as a kid, you're watching a cartoon show. Like you're not really thinking about the overarching narrative that's trying to be pushed down on literal children. But now I look at it in retrospect and I'm like, good grief, that is literally just like propaganda being pushed down against different energy resources that are out there because vibes, because of feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't realize how much it does impact everybody's framing of just like what is default good versus default bad. And it speaks to why I think there are folks out there like your what's her name? Her Greta, right? Was that her name? Greta
Thunberg.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you have AOC out there with the Green New Deal. Mm-hmm. Like you see these reoccurring themes of young people who are bringing air quote solutions to the table that aren't really solutions. It's a narrative that's being disguised as a solution. So I think you're right. Like we need to be able to kind of take a step back and almost challenge all the preconceived notions. But then it goes to, well, some of us are going to do that, Sarah, but by and large, unfortunately, the court of public opinion, I think, is going to lean against coal, against oil, because those narratives have been so hammered into the psyche of your average young person, especially. So how do we overcome that? Because part of the show here, we talk about sales, messaging, communication. How do we meet these folks where they're at and try to not just dispel some of these preconceived notions, but also reframe where not just they went wrong, not intentionally because of the narrative rather, but then to help them see the benefit and to not just see the benefit, because I think we know, or rather they should know that there is a benefit from this, but they also look at it from to what we talked about earlier, trade-offs, the cost associated. And there's a narrative that goes along, like fracking, for example. One of my older buddies from college, I remember we went to his house in New York at one point, and he was showing us like, hey, watch this. And he like turns on the faucet and he can light the faucet on fire, right? So like those kind of things, they exist and they create this vibe of bad, danger, no good, right? So how do we kind of walk that fine line of trying to like dispel these preconceived notions while at the same point in time, not just telling them to their face, hey, sorry, you're an idiot, you're wrong?
I think the first thing is to be kind of a happy warrior on this issue of energy abundance, and that's what I've been trying very hard to do, frankly, because there are so many reasons to be optimistic about the health of the human environment in the United States and around the globe, in countries where we're first world countries that have lots of wealth. They're able to think about the environmental challenges. I just wrote an article about this at Center of the American Experiment called "The Environment is Getting Better. Why Aren't Kids Being Taught That?" And that got tons of response. It was really exciting to see. But you talk about particulate matter in our air. All of these six particulates that are really important. The kind of things that caused sulfur rain. I think sulfur dioxide is down 92% since 1990. So we've done a lot of impressive stuff cleaning our air, our water, conserving endangered species through voluntary protections, and not just the heavy hand of the Endangered Species Act, people coming together to actually prevent them from getting onto the list in the first place. Forest cover has stayed stable in the United States since, 1910. While our population has tripled. All of these things are really important things for kids to learn, and they simply aren't being taught that in a lot of schooling. So my first recommendation would be, talk about these things with optimism. Stop spreading doom and gloom for no reason, because all you do with that is create helplessness, right?
Well, by the way, like... I don't know about you, but I remember when I was in high school, we were all forced to watch An Inconvenient Truth, right? Yeah. And you're right. Like this doom and gloom, that's all we are force fed. And the fact that things have gotten so much better, it just isn't talked about. And I guess, goes to the old narrative. And this is, one thing that I think it is pretty true, but my old college professor used to say this too, right? Like the idea, if it bleeds, it leads. He would always say, when you would sit down to watch the news, the evening news, and they would start the show by saying, good evening, and then spend the next 29 minutes telling you why it wasn't going to be one. Right. And like that right there, I don't know if that's part of the problem or it's something more nefarious, right? Like there are forces behind the scenes trying to pull some strings to create the perception that certain technologies are dangerous, or the fact that they've led to, this situation where we're just on the edge of a cliff, which if you go talk to, some of the younger folk, the Gen Zers and even my generations of the millennials, you see this a lot where there is this, I'm going to call it climate hysteria, where they are like, they're physically ill, they're depressed, they're anxious because they feel that the planet is going to turn into this big hot box and explode, right? Like that's the vibe. But then on the flip side, to your point, we've seen the market answer these questions, the market creating solutions to the problems that we rightfully identified over the years. But now we're seeing that not only are these issues being taken care of, but in many instances, the issues just kind of disappear, right? And that narrative isn't discussed. And I'll conclude my final piece here with this. Like, it goes to this entrepreneurial spirit, Sarah, where I saw this post, and man, it's so true. Like it was a Henry Ford quote. And he goes, if I had asked the customer what they would want, they would have wanted a faster horse. Right.
Precisely.
And that right there speaks to where, like, there's a customer base, air quotes, that they think they know what they want until somebody goes out of their way to create something so revolutionary, so eye-opening that the questions change, right? And that, I think, is where we are today from the energy, not just the consumption side, but the production side, where we can start to find not just the innovative, cool ways to create more energy that's more cost efficient, but then on the other side, without as many trade-offs, without all the risks. So I think we're in a really cool spot, Sarah. And I'll finish my piece just saying, thank you for helping be the happy warrior. Thank you for actually raising up what's actually happening behind the scenes and how it's not all doom and gloom. Even the preconceived notions that we kind of grew up with in the 90s and 2000s, where it was doom and gloom. It was the Al Gore, watch this graph, it's going to go up, and then all of a sudden all the polar bears are not going to have any food, right? Like, that's just not true. And we're seeing that now. And the fact that not only are we seeing that now, but the technology is actually taking those old yesteryear arguments and just completely tossing them in the garbage can. I love that. But hey, that's my final thoughts for today. Sarah, bring us home here. What would you like the audience to take away from today's conversation? And any, I guess, call to action to the audience from today's episode?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the important thing is to remember that there's always trade-offs to everything. And energy policy is no exception. And when you're out in your communities, pay particular attention to what's happening on your local utility grid. Go to the public meetings, submit your comments, make your voice heard on this stuff, because these kind of policies are the things that go directly into what you pay as a ratepayer for your electricity. There's so much else that we could talk about, but think about the little ways that you can go out and spread some optimism about the environment too. And finally, if you would like to visit centeroftheamericanexperiment.org, americanexperiment.org, Center of the American Experiment, and look at some of my research and see how you can use it in your own life.
Good stuff. Well, Sarah, I really appreciate you hopping on the show. We'll make sure we include the article we were discussing today, by the way, over at Real Clear Energy in the show notes. And by the way, folks, if you stick around towards the end of today's episode, if you're joining us here on YouTube, you're going to see a little video pop up like right here below my microphone. It's going to be our sit-down chat with Isaac Wilhauer. We talked about energy consumption as it specifically pertains to artificial intelligence. And Isaac saying, hey, AI runs on fossil fuel, baby, and life ain't the Lorax. So we dug into that in quite detail. So please check out that past conversation. And as for today's episode, folks, if you got some value from today's episode, please do me a favor. Go ahead and give today's episode a share. When you do, you can tag yours truly over on Facebook, Instagram, and X at B Nichols Liberty. Sarah, where can folks go ahead and reach out to you if they want to continue the conversation?
You can find my contact information on americanexperiment.org, the staff page. If you would like to email me directly, you can also find me on Substack at Montalbano Mondays, and I would love if you would give me a subscribe over there.
Montalbano Mondays. I like it. Awesome. Well,
Thank
we'll
you.
make sure we include, Sarah, all those links there in the show notes. And by the way, folks, for the show, if you enjoy your audio podcasts or your video podcasts, have no fear. You can catch both versions of the Brian Nichols Show over either on your favorite podcast catcher like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or elsewhere. I like Podcast Addict personally. Or if you like video content, head over to YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. We are airing the Brian Nichols Show in its entirety over on those different channels on Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays at 9 p.m. Eastern. We live stream the episodes there. So please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And by the way, sometimes we touch on some topics that YouTube doesn't like. So if we do have sometimes those certain episodes, we will only air them over on X and over on Rumble. So that's why make sure if you have your preferred channel, just always hit that little subscribe button just in case we air one episode on one channel versus the other. But otherwise, folks, if you want to support the show, the best way to do that is to support our sponsors like Cardio Miracle, the Expat Money Show, as well as our other phenomenal sponsors. All of those sponsors can be found at briannicholsshow.com/sponsors, and anything you can do to help support those sponsors helps us here at the show directly. Or if you want to support the show directly just by saying, hey, no middleman, Brian, take my hard-earned cash, please go ahead. PayPal or Cash App donations are welcome. Everything goes right back in here to the show so we can continue to have amazing conversations that educate, enlighten, and inform. With that being said, Sarah, thank you for joining us here on the show. And to you, members of the audience, thank you for joining us. With that being said, Brian Nichols signing off here on The Brian Nichols Show for Sarah Montalbano. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.